Harding, Justin Ritzel joining me here. And this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, January 26th. Yeah, 26th. There we go. I lose track of the days sometimes working from home. 2022. Yes. Hey, look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. There we go, baby. Champion. Pick 4 champion. I'd like to thank the little people. No. I'd like to thank Robert Harding for putting out a beautiful trophy. You know, I got this in the mail.
And carved myself.
Yes, I got this in the mail last week. It wasn't supposed to be this early, but I clinched it. I've got an 8-game lead. There's only 3 games left, so I have clinched it. And look, picking NFL games against the spread is very, very difficult. We all know that. And especially now, because we can do it we can do it on our phones here in New York State. So, yeah, I'm very honored, and you guys are tough, and it wasn't easy, and dare I say, maybe a little bit lucky here now and then. So, but thank you, Robert, for the wonderful trophy. It's right next to the one from last year, is co-champions with you. So, yes. So, all right. But before we get into the NFL, we've got to talk about yesterday's Baseball Hall of Fame voting results. David Ortiz is the lone candidate to be inducted by the writers. There's a ton of other players that are being inducted by, I guess, it used to be called the Veterans Committee, but it's got a different name now. But people like Gil Hodges and Tony Oliva and Jim Cott and a lot of other Buck O'Neill, a lot of the older players that were not elected by the writers are going into Cooperstown this summer. But David Ortiz is the lone, the lone person on the ballot who got in. Roger Clemens didn't get in again. Barry Bonds didn't get in. Curt Schilling. I got to give a shout out to Billy Wagner, former Auburn Astro, started his pro career here in Auburn, 1993. He got about 51%. I'd love to see him get in. But obviously the controversy, and if you were on Twitter last night, the outrage, the fact that Bonds, Clemens, and Schilling did not get in. And, I'm not going to, look, I understand how the process works, and I understand why some people are willing to vote for these guys and why they're not willing to vote for these guys. And it's a mess. There's just no way around it. It is a giant, colossal mess. And you can't fix it unless you dramatically change the procedure for electing players into the Hall of Fame. Personally, I feel the writers are the best ones qualified to vote for the Hall of Fame. The only tinkering I would make maybe is broadcasters with a certain amount of time, because for a baseball writer, you guys know this, to be eligible to vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame, you have to be a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America for 10 years. And the theory is that if you're a beat writer and you're seeing baseball every day for an entire season for 10 years, you've seen players enough that you know whether they're qualified for the Hall of Fame or not. Broadcasters are not eligible because they're not writers, that they can't be members of the BBWA because they're not baseball writers. I would include broadcasters like play-by-play guys, color analysts, that have 10 years doing it. I think they would be as qualified as anybody. That's really the only tinkering I would do. I think overall the system works when you look at things as a whole. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect every year. No system is. But I understand why some people voted for Bonds, Clemens, and Schilling, and I understand why some people didn't. Robert, your thoughts about the Baseball Hall of Fame balloting?
Well, it's a joke, Chris. That's really what it's turned into. I get why Ortiz got in, and I have no, in the big scheme of things here, I have no issues with him getting in. I think he's deserving of getting into the Hall of Fame. But this idea that somehow we're just supposed to ignore, his own connection to PEDs because of, some comments made over the years. Oh, we don't know what he tested positive for. I know Rob Manfred, who's a great authority on baseball, by the way, said, a few years back that, we shouldn't put too much stock into this. It's, not that big of a deal. mean, he said that about a lot of things, including the World Series trophy. So, I mean, who's he to judge? But, I think that this is, it's turned into a joke, how they've applied now different standards to players who played in the steroid era. You can't just give a pass to Ortiz for that connection and then look at Bonds and Clemens, who, by the way, never tested positive for anything while they were playing, but they certainly have been linked to it, and say, oh, well, they can't get in. To me, it's ridiculous. It's trying to whitewash a part of baseball history because it's an inconvenient truth for Major League Baseball that these players, especially given the time period that we're talking about, this is after, the decade or so after the 1994 strike, that, these players contributed to the resurgence of baseball, the recovery of baseball, if you will. And so now we're supposed to figure out about all that because baseball is supposedly in a better position. We can afford to just kind of ignore the steroid era and not recognize these players in the Hall of Fame. I think it's a joke. Bonds and Clemens deserve to be there. Schilling, I get why some baseball writers are, this almost reminds me of the debate over Aaron Rodgers, which isn't really much of one, but, it's a discussion about, well, this guy's a bit of a jerk. He's the vaccination stance, among other things. And, one guy came out and said something about that vote, and we know how that went. Schilling obviously is on a much larger scale because of many of his comments over the years. But I think if you look strictly at his baseball resume, he has a comparable resume to other Hall of Famers. And certainly his postseason record, I think, would help put him over the top and put him in there. But it seems like, similar to what we thought might happen with, Rodgers and some other things we've talked about, that writers feel that it's their job to hold players accountable for various actions. And I think that that's wrong. That is not their job. Their job is to vote on the Hall of Fame worthiness of a player. If you have a beef with them because of something they did off the field, in Schilling's case, his terrible Twitter account, or in Bonds and Clemens' case, what they may or may not have done, behind the scenes to prepare for games, that's not your responsibility. You have to look at what they did on the field. And I think that we're getting away from that in a lot of these votes, which, I've always been on the side of, I think that the sports writers are best positioned to vote on this, but I think some tend to look at this differently than some others. There's people with Hall of Fame votes who are now maybe a little more opinionated than those who look at this, with kind of a balanced perspective. And I think that that's dangerous for the voting process, because then you're getting agendas involved where agendas shouldn't be. So Ortiz belongs there. Ortiz himself said, it's a shame that Bonds and Clemens aren't here. I think they should be in. There's other people that we can look at. I'm curious going forward how A-Rod will be treated. Certainly he didn't come close to the vote now, but I suspect at some point, because of his TV work and all of this other stuff, some of the goodwill he's built up, although being dumped by J-Lo certainly won't help his cause. But I am curious how that's going to work out. So, to me, the process is a bit broken, but that's par for the course with baseball these days. They need an overhaul in a lot of different areas.
A-Rod will never get in. I love the cat, by the way, behind Justin. A-Rod will never get in. I mean, look, you can. I
wouldn't say that.
No, Robert. Look. I'll tell you why. Okay. I mean, look, we're going to have to compare A-Rod to Bonds and Clemens. Okay. And the difference between those three guys is that A-Rod got caught and was suspended for a year. Okay. Now, look, we all know that Bonds and Clemens did steroids. There's no doubt about it. Okay. Clemens' trainer testified to it. Okay. Andy Pettit discussed it. Okay. Barry Bonds, I mean, look, we have the Belco, all that other stuff. So even though they never failed the drug test in Major League Baseball, the numbers that they put up at a certain age and their appearances and everything else and other testimony basically says, yeah, they did steroids. Okay.
Here's what let me just respond to that A-Rod point, though. 1/3 of the baseball writers voted for him to get in the Hall, despite being caught. I mean, think about all these other guys that, the Sosas and Manny Ramirez, and, these guys they don't stand a chance. They've gotten in the single digits and everything else over the years. The fact that A-Rod, that's where he's at, tells me that there's some.
You know why? You know why he got votes? Because it's the same thing with Clemens and Bonds. The fact that they were technically Hall of Famers before they started doing steroids. Okay, you're going to look at A-Rod when he started playing in 1995, and let's say he didn't do steroids until 2005. So for those 10 years that he played, without steroids, allegedly, whatever, he put up numbers as good as anybody. So that's why I think why some of those people voted for A-Rod. They did the whole, before he did steroids, he was going to be a Hall of Famer, so I'm going to vote for him anyways. Justin, you've been patient. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think A-Rod has admitted since that he took steroids much earlier in his career, like kind of when he signed that giant contract with Texas Rangers.
Was 2004, I think.
Well, 2004, he was with the Yankees. So,
that's right.
He admitted to taking them well before that, early 2000s. We've talked about this seemingly every year that the Baseball Hall of Fame announcement comes. I think I've been pretty consistent that I don't believe that players with ties to steroids should get in. To be honest, though, I think I've softened on that stance. I just think that there is such a gray area. Like, why are we holding certain guys accountable to one thing and other guys not accountable for generally the same thing? I also think that it's tough to put all these players that have ties to steroids under one umbrella. I think there are certain different circumstances, like you mentioned, Ortiz was named in a New York Times report that got leaked that wasn't supposed to, and you got Rob Manfred sticking up for him saying, hey, that could have been a false positive, we don't know, that was supposed to be private. You have guys like Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, all these guys who actually went in front of Congress and were tried for perjury and all that kind of stuff, and then you have the guys like A-Rod who didn't do any of that stuff legally, go in front of court and all that, but was actually suspended. So there's just so many different stories to balance. I've just come around to the fact that even the guys that have ties to steroids, just put them in the Hall of Fame based on the merit of their on-field performance. And then on their plaque, just put a little note, so-and-so was included or in the Balco investigation or whatever. Just throw that on there. I think that singling out certain guys and holding Bonds and Clemens to a certain standard and not David Ortiz to the same standard, I think that's silly. I will say, Robert, you compared, the inevitable debate we're going to have regarding NFL MVP and how Aaron Rodgers is being portrayed in that versus what's going on with the Hall of Fame. And I will say the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot does say the player's record, playing ability, integrity, sportsmanship, character, and contribution should all be considered. So there is a note for the baseball that we do want you to consider, outside factors aside from on-field performance. Now, I think that's kind of a joke because we all know that there are a lot of guys in the Baseball Hall of Fame who weren't good people, who did things off the field that aren't right, and they still got in. We have, Gaylord Perry, who openly cheated the way he threw the baseball. He's in. So, I don't know why we're drawing a line in the sand here with steroids. They should be in, as much as I disagree with the fact that they took steroids and how it's a black mark on baseball and it's still haunting the sport to this day. They're Hall of Famers. And it's a shame that they won't be. I shouldn't say it's a shame, but it's wrong that they aren't recognized as such. That said, I don't understand the people who are throwing up their arms in disgust because they didn't get in. Listen, the guys cheated, so I'm not gonna cry over them not getting in because they're a big reason why baseball is in the bad spot that it is now. But they're one small piece of a lot of people who didn't handle that situation right, and I think that Bonds and Clemens are being scapegoated unfairly here.
You get the last word, Robert, if you want it.
I'll just add here that I think that this should lead to some further thought about how to treat the steroid era players and how how you recognize that part in history, because look, the record books haven't changed. When you look at the home run leader, Barry Bonds is the home run leader, and I know that there's some people who would argue, well, he's in the record book. That's all we need to do to recognize that. And I'd say, well, not really. You look at some of the other, the Clemenses, how he climbed up the record books with his performance. McGuire was the single season record holder, until Bonds. So he's still high on the record list, and that's just to name a few. So I think if you're not going to, and I don't think they can, I'm not supporting this, but if you can't, wipe their records away, then you can't just totally ignore them when the conversation in the Hall of Fame comes up. I'm with Justin that I think you put them in and then add a note, an asterisk of sorts, and say, look, this player was linked to PEDs during the steroid era. But I think part of the problem here is the Hall of Fame itself, to be honest. We see how they've treated Pete Rose over the years. A big reason why Pete Rose isn't in is because of the Hall of Fame. And so I think that, just this whole process to me, with Ortiz's election, it revealed there's a lot of hypocrisy in it, from top to bottom. And, I think baseball's had a problem for many years now, and they really haven't come to grips with it. And I just had a thought too that, with this discussion of cheating in general, I'll be curious to see how a player like Jose Altuve, who's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, will be treated when his time comes. Because if he's treated differently when he benefited from cheating, then we know that Bonds and Clemens were probably unfairly so left out of this process, when clearly the Hall of Fame voters don't have a problem with some cheating.
All right, we'll move on to our NFL this part of the show. We're going to just do, I'm going to do a brief recap of the divisional round. So, yeah, Bengals, Titans. Dolphins fans says, told you so, Titan fans, about Ryan Tannehill. You knew he'd throw up a stinker, and sure enough, he did. Justin's Packers against the Niners. Justin, I feel for you, man. But, boy, that was a bad game. I mean, that was just a really bad – the Packers gave that game away, in my opinion. And then, of course, the Rams and the Bucks. What an entertaining, fun game that was. I mean, look, when it was 27-3, everybody was saying, that Tom Brady was down 28-3 in the Super Bowl. He can come back from this. And son of a gun, the Rams let him get back in it. But ultimately, the Rams made the plays. And that was as exciting a game as you've seen. And then, of course, it got topped by Robert's Bills and the Chiefs. And, I'll let Robert do the bulk of the talking because he is the Bills fan. But, I mean, there's so many things that the Bills could have done to have won that game in regulation. And we can talk about the squib kick maybe, which probably only would have taken maybe 1 or 2 seconds off. The defense that they played. Someone much smarter than me said, hey, why didn't the Bills defenders just basically interfere with the receivers coming off the line? It would have been a 5-yard penalty, but time would have ran off the clock. I think it's kind of tough to think of those types of things in the heat of the moment. The Bills played a great game, no doubt about it. It was probably one of the greatest NFL games of all time, if not the greatest. I think you can put it in that conversation, no doubt about it. The greatest game in NFL history. For a lot of reasons, but wow, maybe the greatest divisional weekend of all time, and it was crazy and fun. And I feel bad for you guys that both your teams were knocked out. I would love to see a Green Bay Buffalo Super Bowl. We really could have some fun videos with that one in mind, but it still was a great weekend. And so, Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, it's funny when after Saturday night, I was going to come in with a lot of Packers hot takes about their special team situation, and boy, did Sunday change that. I've never been that emotionally invested in the game. Chris, you've watched a game or two with me, and involving the Bills, and I keep a pretty level head. I might get pissed off here or there at a call, but I was out of my seat watching that. My wife can confirm this. My daughter slept through the whole thing somehow, but that was just a wild stretch, and I won't break down the entire game. I just want to say this about the final stretch is that Sean McDermott failed Josh Allen. And I'll lump Leslie Frazier into this, although we know it's McDermott's team. The defense wasn't prepared for that series, that game-tying series of the Chiefs. They looked totally out of place. The throw to Kelsey was the backbreaker because here's the best tight end arguably ever to play, and he's wide open running down the seam. I mean, what the hell are you doing? And the fact that the Bills took 2 timeouts, the Chiefs ran those 2 plays. Bills took 2 timeouts, back-to-back timeouts ahead of both of those plays, and still looked overmatched, unprepared. It's just inexcusable to me. I'm not out here saying that Sean McDermott should be fired or anything, but I do think it explains some of his responses to questions at these press conferences since then, that he clearly, I think, is a bit upset with himself for what happened in those final 13 seconds, because, the handling of that series was just poor from start to finish. Like, I don't get why you needed to call a timeout. Just let the defense play. Don't let the Chiefs, with Andy Reid, one of the greatest offensive minds in history, make even more adjustments. And McDermott should know better because he used to work for Andy Reid. And then you do it, you repeat the process all over again on the next play. And, that allowed Kelsey to tell Mahomes, like, hey, I'm going to run this route. And Mahomes is like, all right, go for it. And the rest is history. So I don't blame the Bills for having a bad taste in their mouths after this, because you look at the playoff landscape now. I don't think they'd have any problems against the Niners if they made the Super Bowl. Quite frankly, I think they're a better team than the Rams. They certainly have a better quarterback than the Rams. And as for the Bengals in the AFC Championship game, look, they've squeaked by. They squeaked by the Raiders, and the same thing with the Titans. They lucked out against the Titans. Tannehill threw that pick, and they were sitting pretty from there. So I don't think the Bills would have had any trouble against the Bengals. This was a great shot for them to win their first Super Bowl, and they blew it. And a lot of it's due to bad coaching decisions. I think Josh Allen has, erased all doubt, if there was any left, that he's one of the game's premier quarterbacks. And unfortunately, his coach got in the way of them making it to the Super Bowl and actually winning it this time. Sean McDermott came in with an attitude that this wasn't going to be the Bills of the past, that we weren't going to have these disappointing finishes, that we weren't going to have the Music City Miracles and, all the late game blunders and, more Super Bowl losses on top of that. And he let us down. He let down the Bills fan base, I think, with how they handled the last 13 seconds. And, he's got a long way to go to fix that problem. To me, that's unforgivable. You just wasted an all-time great effort by your quarterback. And, it's a terrible blunder, an all-time blunder that he committed. Just bad coaching all around after coaching a fairly good game up until that point. That's rough. It's going to be a rough offseason for the Bills.
Justin?
I feel for Josh Allen too. I mean, he was on pace, had the Bills been able to win that game and play one more game and maybe go to the Super Bowl, like, we're probably looking at one of the all-time great runs by a quarterback in a single postseason. He was that good. Pretty much perfect through 2 games. You cannot ask your quarterback to play any better than Josh Allen did. We have this conversation all the time. I've lived through this as a Packers fan, that, you get that first taste. And obviously my team was fortunate enough to win a Super Bowl, over 10 years ago, but you get that taste and you're like, you know what, we're going to have it made for the next 10 years. We're going to be back competing for Super Bowls every single year. Chris, you lived through this with Dan Marino. He loses
second year. His second year, they went 14-2, went to the Super Bowl, and they have not been back since.
It's just so incredibly difficult to get back. And that's why you have to take advantage of the opportunities when they're there. Drew Brees, another one, got to one Super Bowl, won it. You think he's going to have a good shot to make it back to a few, never made it back. So, I would certainly rather be in the Bills position than the position of my football team, because Josh Allen is young and he's going to be there for a long time. And obviously he's uber talented, but you just look at the AFC and the quarterbacks that are in the AFC, and the fact that, Joe Burrow's going to be around. You got to figure with Justin Herbert, the Chargers are going to have their years when they contend. Lamar Jackson, like, everybody kind of forgets about him because he had a bad year, but that's a former MVP. The Ravens are going to be around if he stays healthy. So I just don't think it's as simple as like the AFC in the 2000s, when it basically came down to Brady or Manning every year, and you just kind of hope that it swings your way every once in a while. The Bills blew an opportunity. We'll see if they can regroup and put together a nice team again next year. I'm sure they will, and then just take advantage of their opportunities. I think we'd be remiss to not bring up the joke that is the current NFL overtime rules.
Yes.
There's no reason that Josh Allen and the Bills offense should have not gotten another chance there. I know that a lot of people have argued, just get a stop at the end, get a stop. And yeah, I agree. The Bills should have gotten a stop. That's inexcusable to give up those yards with 13 seconds left. But that's erroneous. The point is that through 60 minutes, neither team did enough to prove they should win that game. It was even. So why does one team get such a decided advantage when overtime starts? It's just not fair, especially when you consider the way the rules are in today's NFL. We all know they favor the offense. When you get the ball first and you can get a touchdown to win the game, the proof is in the pudding. Look at the amount of overtime games in this current format. How many of those games have favored the team that won the coin toss? I think that they put out the stat that out of the 11 overtime games in the playoffs, since they kind of changed the rules to how they currently are, 10 of the coin toss winners ended up winning the game. Now, that's a little deceiving because some of those games, both teams did get a possession, but 7 out of those 11 ended on that first possession. So the offense just straight up didn't get a chance, or the one team just didn't get a chance. I know, I've lived through it. That happened to the Packers two years in a row, against the Seahawks in 14 and against the Cardinals in 15. And in those cases, the Cardinals were the team that couldn't get off the field at the end, and Rodgers threw those 2 Hail Marys and got the game into overtime, and didn't matter. He didn't get a chance with the ball again. So I just don't see the downside of giving both teams at least one possession. It feeds right into what the NFL wants, which is more offense. So to suddenly say when your season is on the line, when all legacies are being defined, defense, just go get a stop. Football's not, at least NFL football is not designed to work that way. It's not a 50-50 proposition anymore like it was in maybe the 80s or 90s when offenses and defenses are on a level playing field. And it's past time that the overtime rules indicate that, because that was nonsense. How the Bills season ended, setting aside the fact they should have gotten the field. Josh Allen should have gotten the ball one more time.
Look, I'm one of those people. I'm old fashioned. I can remember the days when all you needed was a field goal. That was it. First team that scored one, and we had that game, postseason game or whatever, where team got a field goal on the first drive, and that was it. And so they've changed it now, where if it's a field goal, then the other team gets possession. Then after that, it's sudden death. I think what really ought to be done, I read this someplace, and I can't remember where it was, but this was a good one, is that when overtime starts, the team that had the ball last gets the ball first in overtime. And then they get their possession. They score a touchdown, fine. Then the other team gets a possession too, and then they've got to do something with it. And if they don't score a touchdown to keep the game going or whatever, then it's over. Because remember, the whole idea is it's called sudden death. I mean, that's about as blunt as you can get. Sudden death, okay? And but I agree with you guys. I mean, this was, the Bills definitely, you wish they had a shot, and you understand what happened to their defense and everything, that those guys had to be, I don't know how tired they were, but I'm sure they were somewhat tired by the end of that game because it was a pretty emotional roller coaster. But I kind of like that, each team gets possession in overtime, and only the postseason. We don't need to do this in the regular season. The regular season rules that we have now are fine. But in the postseason, when it is so much at stake, that yes, each team gets one possession. There's no coin flip. That way, that, like I said, the team that has the ball last in regulation gets it again in overtime, like the beginning of a new quarter, okay, like the third into the fourth quarter, whatever you want to say. And I think that's fair. And but like I said, just a crazy finish, and one we'll be talking about for a while. So, Robert, anything else you want to add? No, go ahead, Justin.
Let me throw this in there for those that say, defense needs to play a role here too. Listen, if the overtime rules were fair, then how come we don't see more teams say we'll play defense first?
Yeah,
we'll let the other team take the ball first. Why doesn't that never happen? Oh, it's because everyone knows that you're at a great advantage when you have the ball. Like, this isn't complicated, people. It's time to change.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing, and then we can move on to the picks, Chris. A few years ago, we were having the same conversation after the Chiefs lost to the Patriots. And I remember this because we talked at length about this subject then after the Chiefs lost to the Patriots. They played that great game. I think it was at Arrowhead. And it was tied 31 all at the end of regulation. Patriots won the toss, got the ball. Brady goes down the field. They score a touchdown, and that's that. I agree with what Justin said, is that, the NFL is an offensive friendly league, and, it's just right to give the team one possession. If you look at the college format, I'm not saying give the ball, 25-yard line or whatever, but each team gets a possession. And, if it continues on from there, it continues on. But, each team at least gets a possession. I think that part of the college overtime is correct, that each team should get a possession, regardless of what the team who gets the ball first does. If they score a touchdown, great, but the other team should at least have one shot with the ball and see what happens. And then from there, you can play sudden death. But it's just, the overtime rules are a mess anyway. I mean, if you go down and kick a field goal, the game's not over, and then if the other team kicks a field goal, it's still not over, you can keep playing. So there's a lot of different scenarios that can play out. It definitely rewards teams for scoring touchdowns. But, I think that this will lead to some change, because if you're truly embracing the offense that this league has, you don't want to see a situation again where you're basically robbing one of the great offensive teams of a chance to equal another great offensive team on the field. You need to take away the coin flip, essentially. And to your point, Chris, figure out a way that, okay, you get the ball first, and then just work your way from there. Give it to the home team, whatever idea you have, and then, go from there instead of leaning on the coin flip. Yeah.
The only other change I could imagine is you play only in the postseason again, okay, that you play a 10-minute overtime period, set. So in other words, let's say Kansas City goes down and scores a touchdown first. Okay, game's not over. The Bills get their shot, and you play till those 10 minutes are done, and whoever's ahead, they win the game. And if the game is still tied, then you play another 10 minutes until somebody's ahead, and do it that way. So, I mean, there are solutions to this. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, but we'll see what the NFL does.
What about that spot and choose proposition that's been?
Oh, that's a gimmick. Don't give me the gimmicks.
Well,
gimmick.
I wouldn't go that route. I think it's interesting.
It's a gimmick.
I still think at the end of the day, you're going to choose to take the ball, like whether it's at your own 20. I mean, if you're the team that's choosing the yard line, at what point, does the other team not want to take the ball? Like at your own one?
Yeah, it's a gimmick. It's like that. What's that thing that? What is it? Oh, I forgot the name of it now. But remember there was talk about, like, instead of doing an onside kick, you get the ball at your own 25 and you have a 4th and 15 and you've got to convert it to keep the ball instead of doing onside kicks. That's a gimmick. We don't need gimmicks, okay? No. So, all right, let's get to the picks. So last week I was the leader 2-2. Whatever. It was those are some fun games. Robert and Justin reached 1-3. So we go into the conference championships now. The first game, San Francisco 49ers, Los Angeles Rams. Rams are 3.5-point favorites. I am stunned that the Niners have beaten the Rams the last 6 times in a row. That is astounding, considering how good the Rams have been, how good the Niners have been, that these teams are now a little more even. And that the Niners, as we know, because of this, they swept the Rams this year. They won early on. It might have been week 3 or something. And then, of course, we all know the last week of the regular season, the Niners overcame a 17-point deficit, won the game, got into the playoffs, and here we are. So, look, there's a lot of things with this game. The Niners are going to want to run the football, okay? I mean, they run the ball most on first down than any other team in the NFL. I looked this up. I think it's around 57%. So they're going to want to run the football to keep the ball away from Matthew Stafford and that potent Rams offense. Defensively, look, the Niners have a great defense. There's no doubt about it. What they did to Dallas, what they did to Green Bay, they are top notch. They're one of the best defenses in the league. Okay. But there's a Shearism that I can't use it that often, but I'm bringing it up now. It's the old thing that it's very tough to beat a team 3 times in one.
You were going in that direction. I just knew it. I knew you were.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I'm predictable, but hey, that's the thing. And the Rams, they know what's at stake here. I mean, they have home field for this game. Although supposedly the Rams are banning people from Northern California from buying tickets online. I don't know how you do that. I mean, that's the thing about the secondary market being all online now. It's very easy for another team's fans with a big fan base like Justin's Packers or the Bills to take over a visiting home team stadium and make it their own. But the Rams know that if they win this game, they're playing the Super Bowl on their own field. I mean, it's all set up for them perfectly. And, the Rams, look, the Niners, they took advantage of a Dallas team that was poorly coached, poorly executed, that shot themselves in the foot with all the penalties. So I wouldn't say they got lucky, but they took advantage of Dallas playing their worst game, obviously. Against Green Bay, I don't know what was going on in that game with Green Bay's offense. I just kept waiting for Green Bay's offense, for Rodgers to get into gear, and it never happened. And, of course, the special teams mistakes the Packers made. So, again, the 49ers took advantage of the other team's poor play, mistakes, to win. This week, I don't think the Rams are going to shoot themselves in the foot like the Packers and the Cowboys did. So I am going with the Rams to cover the 3.5. I think they get it done. My buddy Dave Coleman, shout out to Dave, the Rams fan since the mid-'70s. Your Rams are going back to the Super Bowl, second time, I think, in 4 years. I like them to win and cover the 3.5 against the Niners. Go ahead, Robert.
Boy, you really laid it on thick here. I think the easy route would be to pick the Rams here. They on paper, I think they have a better all-around team, but the Niners beating them twice, and you can say what you want about beating them a third time, but Shanahan and McVay have gone up against each other the last few years, and Shanahan's had his number, and the Niners have that great defense. The special teams, Shanahan offered some secrets there that they use starting players on special teams. They don't just let the 53rd man on the roster just go out there and be their special teams ace. So I think that's significant. And then on offense, if Jimmy G is even, moderately competent in this game, if he doesn't turn the ball over, which is tough for him. He's on quite a streak right now with that, but they've still been winning. And if they can run the ball well, which, historically they have against the Rams, I think they can win this game. You got to remember, you got Matt Stafford on the other side of the field. Yeah, he made he made a great play on that throw to Cooper Kupp at the end of the Bucs game, but remember why they were in that position to begin with. Mistakes by the Rams. They almost blew that game, between Stafford and obviously the fumbles that they lost. So, I think the Niners defense, they're better than the Bucs. So that's going to pose some problems for the Rams. And I think the Niners will be positioned to go into Los Angeles, beat the Rams for the third time this year and advance to the Super Bowl.
All right. So Robert's got the Niners. Go ahead, Justin. Who do you like?
Well, yes, McVay has struggled against his old counterpart, Kyle Shanahan. Niners, as you guys have said, won both those matchups this year. But I'm looking at it as who do I feel is the team that is playing better right now? And I think that's the Rams. I think the 49ers are fortunate to be in this position. It took a colossal special teams failure on the Packers' part for the 49ers to win that game. There's no reason San Fran should be playing this week. Garoppolo was just terrible. I mean, I don't know how you can watch that game last week. Granted, the quarterback on the other side was also terrible in those conditions, but I don't know how you can look at his play over the last 2 weeks, also knowing that the injuries he's dealing with, and have any confidence that they can get it done. It took such a fluke to win last week in Green Bay. And I don't think you can continue to get lucky like that against a Rams team that is kind of peaking at the right time. I've had my criticisms of Matthew Stafford. I still wonder if his issues in turning the ball over are going to crop up at some point, but he's doing what he needs to do these last couple of weeks, making the big plays when they're there, not turning the ball over. He looks like he's in the zone right now. And really, I think that's often what gets it done. They have playmakers on defense. Odell Beckham has become a threat. That's another thing the Rams have over Green Bay is they have multiple receivers. You want to try and shut down Cooper Kupp. Okay, well, we'll throw the ball to Odell and he'll make plays. So I just think that the Rams, as currently constituted, are going to present problems that the Packers were, for whatever reason, I'm going to wonder it for the rest of my life, the Packers couldn't take advantage of. I think the Rams are just playing their best right now, and I think they're going to win and go back to the Super Bowl. And I'm going to have to eat a lot of crow about my Matthew Stafford takes, but it is what it is.
Again, I think it really comes down to if the Rams can stop the Niners from running the football, they're going to win this game, because you're basically saying that you think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to basically carry this offense and win it for you. And I just don't see that happening. And he's a guy that has been known to have some bad games at the worst times. So we'll see. All right. Our next game is the Cincinnati Bengals. My buddy Frank Berwinzak, big Bengals fan since the 70s. Got to give him a shout out. They are going to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a fat 7-point favorite at home. Again, let's look at the Bengals road here. Okay. They beat the Raiders at home. I mean, look, the Raiders arguably should not have been in the playoffs. It could have been the Chargers. It could have been the Colts. The Raiders did not belong to be in the playoffs, and of course the Bengals took advantage of that and won. Then they go to Tennessee, and again, Tannehill plays like garbage, throws 3 interceptions, sets up the Bengals on a silver platter. I don't know how the Titans didn't win this game with a healthy Derrick Henry, although maybe coming off that injury, he hadn't played in a while. He wasn't fully healthy, and that was part of it. But to me, the Bengals, look, they're a team on the rise, no doubt about it. They're going to be a factor for years to come, but it's not their time yet, okay? And then you look at Kansas City and everything that happened last week. Look, this is incredible what Patrick Mahomes is doing. The level of play, the offense, the offensive play with Kelsey and Hill and everybody else. Kansas City, I can't just see them losing this game. Now, look, it's a 7-point spread. We're picking against the spread. Could the Bengals cover? Yeah, there could be a cover here, but I just don't see the Bengals defense being that good to be able to slow down the Chiefs. Because, look, the Bills have the number 1 defense in the league, and look how many points they gave up last week. The Bengals defense isn't that good. So I'm going to take Kansas City in the points. it's going to be a fun game, but I think Kansas City can cover the -7. I'm going with the Chiefs. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, keep in mind that these two teams did play only a few weeks ago, and the Bengals did win that game. Granted, it was in Cincinnati, not Kansas City, where this game will be played. But yeah, this is a big spread. And like you say, I don't know how anyone stops Mahomes. Listen, I get Joe Burrow hasn't exactly lit it up these past 2 weeks in the playoffs, but he lit up this Chiefs defense a few weeks ago. I think he had over 400 yards, a bunch of touchdowns and stuff. He outplayed Mahomes in that game. So I'm not going to go as far as to say the Bengals are going to win. I just, we've reached that point with Mahomes where I just don't think you can bet against him to win games. He's, after that mid-season lull where he legitimately was just playing bad football, he's found his groove, and you could make a case he's playing the best he's ever played right now, which seems asinine to say, but it's certainly possible. So I don't think the Bengals, I don't think they have that mentality that they're going to just lay down and let the Chiefs roll over them. I think it'll be at least a moderately competitive game. I think the Chiefs will win, but I think the Bengals will cover this. I think they'll keep it within 7. So I'll take Cincinnati.
All right, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Bengals could win this game. And, I'm not just saying that because I'm, pissed at the Chiefs
We know.
for their lucky win. But the Chiefs have a history of these close games and losing some of these games, and I think that the key here, we know that the Chiefs can score points, and the Bengals defense is okay. I mean, they're not bad, but they're not one of the great units out there either. I think that they can do a good enough job against the Chiefs that they're able to stay in the game. Really the question is how much damage can the Bengals offense can do, because Burrow has really, it's gotten kind of overlooked because Josh Allen and Mahomes have played better, but Joe Burrow has certainly shown in this postseason that he can play. He's definitely come up as a one of the top quarterbacks in the league so far, certainly among the younger group. So when you look at the Bengals' weapons, you got Joe Mixon back there. That wide receiving core is just monstrous. You got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd as a good third option. The tight end Uzomah is a solid option as well. So they've got some weapons, and I tell you, I'd argue that they have more weapons than the Bills have. And we saw how the Bills played against the Chiefs defense. That defense, they're vulnerable. They can give up some points, especially against better offenses. So I think that this will be a close game, and I'm going to pick the Bengals to cover here too. I think 7 is a pretty large spread. We've picked the Chiefs a lot this season, and you guys know more often than not they don't cover.
They don't cover. I know.
So it's for me, 7. It's like right in that perfect spot. You win by a touchdown or whatever, but I think it'll be a closer game than most people think. I think there was a lot of talk, the Chiefs Bills, that's like the real AFC title game or whatever. The Bengals are just going to be pushovers. I think the Bengals will be motivated by that, to say, hey, look, we might not have Mahomes or Josh Allen yet, but Joe Burrow is okay. And by the way, we've got all these guys on offense too that can put up some points. So I think it'll be a much better AFC championship game than people think.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, as always, an honor and a pleasure. For everybody watching, we say thank you for joining us again, and we'll see you next week where we know who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl.